Hello everybody, Kelly Rice here, but I write under my pen name KM Rice, and welcome to this video blog. First off, I just want to start by thanking all of my generous donors, backers, and supporters of my recent Darkling audiobook crowdfund campaign. We reached more than our goal. We reached our goal by 126%, which is incredible and awesome, just like you guys are, and I could not have done it without you. So thank you very much. Today's question is going to piggyback off of my most recent vlog episode about why every writer should study screenwriting. Someone posted a question on it that was kind of a follow-up. So I have, again, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, it's not intentional. Ava Fermi. Have you ever thought to novelize one of your scripts? And how do you decide which stories should be a script or a novel? This is one of those questions, every once in a while you guys throw a question at me that it sticks with me because I can't answer it off the top of my head. It's not a quick and easy thing. My initial reaction to that question is instinct. I decide which stories are best suited for a book and which are best suited for a screenplay on instinct. But I recognize that this is a highly sophisticated state of cerebral existence. And so very little instinct is actually involved. This isn't involving the reptilian brain or the mammalian brain. Obviously it's language and storytelling formatting and visual versus written storytelling. So that forces me to then reflect and think, well, how did I develop this instinct? And what actually goes into the thought process, albeit it might be a quick one for me by now, but what goes into it. So I know I've said it before and I'm just saying it again. That's why I love doing this vlog. I didn't expect to get so much self-reflection and insight out of it, and when you give me these hard questions it really forces me to look at my process and my creativity to be able to answer it for you, and then I hope in turn that my answers assist you in your learning and your journey on this wonderful writing adventure. I should also show you my top, kind of going back to my roots. I've got another one of my cute tops on that, again, you guys are the first ones to see it. Never worn it out. I don't go out. So without further ado, let me get to that question. Or try to. The first part of their question was novelizing a script. And I have considered that before, definitely. I haven't actually done it though. So it's something I've thought about a lot, but I haven't actually put into action. I have done the opposite several times. And I suppose that goes into the second part of the question because it's all part of the learning process. Most of these scripts were early on in my screenwriting career. The first one that I think of is a script that I've titled The Breach is Full of Stitches, and that was based on one of my first attempts to write a novel. And it was about this character who just sort of jigged into my head one day, and he demanded a story be told about him and his life and his background. And I recognize now, he's an Irish character, and I recognize now that he was my way of processing my Irish background and my own family's story as immigrants from Ireland and as Irish Americans. So I put a lot of those experiences and the culture as I have experienced it into that character. I think that's part of why he never took off, as it were. I was fascinated by this character, I was in love with this character, but I never really pursued it beyond a short story. And again, I think that's because psychologically it was more me exploring this part of my culture and my family and processing it than it was necessarily an authentic desire to tell a story. And I hope that's helpful to some people too, because I talk a lot about how, oh, I can write so fast, and I've written all these books and they're not out yet, blah, blah, blah. What I'm not always sharing is all the false starts and all the different ways that you need to explore a story or an impulse or a source of inspiration for you before you can necessarily arrive at a piece of work that is suitable for a book or for a script. So I bring up this character that I used to be in love with in my early 20s and write about because now I have had time to reflect on the true nature of this character. I do think he's a strong enough character to stand alone. I did write a script about him. I attempted to write a novel of his life story, and I was hitting a lot of walls. Part of that was because it was one of my first attempts to write a book. So then I started studying screenwriting, and I wrote a screenplay that my professor thought was pretty strong about this character, but it wasn't ever something that, I hate to say it, but it wasn't something that ever really had a market. Again, it was more of a personal exploration, something cathartic to my psyche that I had to do so that I could potentially then move on and develop more characters. Sorry about that. I just had to delete our most recent Happy Hobbit footage to make room for this video blog, which I should have done before I started recording. Apparently I'm irresponsible in that way. So back to what I was just talking about, yes. I'm giving you this example of this character because he was a stock character in my imagination. I think that he, in reality, is more well-rounded than a stock character that you would ever see in a play or on screen or in a book. But in my imagination, he was a go-to figure to explore, a vehicle, really, to explore that part of my creativity and that part of my psyche that I was trying to process. And I'm telling you that I can recognize that now because I started off by saying, oh, it's instinct. It's easy for me to decide if a story's fit for a script or if it's fit for the page. But, okay, yeah, I know a script is the page, but you know what I mean. A visual art form versus written. And I say that because that was all part of my learning process. I was trying to write his story as a novel before I was prepared to fully write a novel. And then I wrote his story as a screenplay because I realized, probably because it wasn't deep enough or rich enough or nuanced enough to be a novel, it was more suited for the screen. So that's why I wrote it as a screenplay. And then that script was definitely satisfying. However, I know that I then wrote a different iteration of the character as a long, short story. So again, I say that this was a stock character in my imagination because every time I came back to him, he was slightly different. And his own mythology within the novel, the screenplay, and the short story, they weren't all exactly in the same world. He had a different significant other in each one, or his family was a little different. So again, I bring up that was something that I was trying to work out, and I think that was part of my process of determining which media is the most suited. I did that also with one of my screenplays. I think it was the fourth screenplay that I ever wrote, and it's one of the ones that I'm known for because it did sweep almost every competition that I entered it in, and it's called Daughters of the Wind. And that one was the reverse. That one began as a short story, and I immediately felt that I had tapped into a world that would be beautiful visually and that would be very well suited for the screen. And again, that wasn't as, it could be very rich and detailed, but I didn't have the drive in me to linger in that world long enough to completely flesh out every corner of it. So that's part of why I chose to then adapt that story to a screenplay, because I felt that that was something that would be very receptive to the collaborative process of filmmaking. So there you go. That's one of the tenets you can use when trying to decide how precious is the material to you. Your scripts should be something that you're passionate about and excited about. They should be relatively precious to you. But as I said before in my screenwriting vlog, it also needs to be material that you're not going to be a total control freak over, because ultimately it's a massively collaborative process. I'm shocked that any film gets made because of how many people. There's an army involved in making it happen. So it's interesting though, because I've realized I feel that way about certain books too. And I guess that's just because, as important to me as the stories are, like Darkling's one of those books, I'm also don't feel a fierce possessive ownership to it. And I think it probably just goes back to the psychology of how much of you is in the work. One of my professors would always caution against naming characters after yourself, or using kind of a Mary Sue-like character, or putting characters in who are representative of yourself or your loved ones, because you will be very hesitant to put them in any jeopardy. You'll be very hesitant to make bad things happen to them, and that's because if you identify with that character, why would you want to harm yourself in that way? Unless you're a masochist, I don't know. So, that I think can also be said towards material that you have somehow invested more of your soul in. So for Darkling, there's definitely me in there. I wrote it. It came from me. It's a child of mine in that way, and I completely acknowledge that and recognize that. And it is a world that I obviously returned to and wanted to return to and flesh out more through the companion novel, The Watcher, due out late this summer or early this autumn. That said, it is not precious to me in the way that other books have been precious to me. The first book that I ever actually wrote, which again I'm sorry I reference and you can't go look it up, that one was so dear to me that I stopped trying to sell it because I didn't want to see it torn apart. My upcoming series, Afterworld, is something that I have invested so much of my heart, soul, and being in that I am much more precious about it than I am about Darkling or The Watcher or any of the other books that I'm going to have coming out. And I think it's just a balancing act. You're going to have stories that you tell, that you told because you were excited to tell them, because they came easily to you, like Darkling, because they were worthwhile and you're invested in them. And then there'll be other ones that are just on a completely different level. And you'll have been so invested in them through the whole process that it will be more difficult for you to let them go. And those stories, I think, will also be more difficult for you to write as a screenplay, because you can only tell a portion of that story in a screenplay. So that's the other factor that goes into determining whether a story is right for a script or for a book. How, not only invested, but how rich, detailed, and nuanced is the story that you're trying to capture. I was having a conversation a month or two ago with a former soldier, and he was expressing his dissatisfaction with the way PTSD has been displayed in films. And so then the other people in the conversation were like, well, what about this movie? What about that movie? And he just kept saying, it doesn't scratch the surface. Those don't even scratch the surface. And I hear him, and I understand his frustration, because, you know, he's someone who's living through this, and he's not seeing his experience reflected. And what I said to him then, though, when he started describing in detail what he wants to see conveyed about PTSD, I said, you need a book. You know, a film can't do all of that. A film can't have that breadth and that depth. It can't show that many characters and how it affects the daily lives of people. And he was like, oh, maybe I do. So there you go. There's another example of kind of feeling out what type of story is it that I'm trying to tell. What are your goals in telling the story? And I say that hesitantly for myself, but I say that knowing that many of you are people who probably outline and plot your stories, and so when you do that, you can probably see story threads developing and themes developing. Since I don't do that, it's dangerous for me to ever approach a story from a goal or a theme, because then it really can become heavy and didactic, which I don't like. I don't like ever feeling like I'm being preached to in my entertainment. I would be perfectly fine with coming to conclusions myself that the author or the filmmakers wanted me to come to, but don't beat me over the head with it. Don't make me feel stupid. I want to feel smart. So those are definite factors in determining if your story is best suited for the books or best suited for screens. I don't know why that got weirdly plural, but it did. Maybe you're going to write a whole series. Maybe you're going to write a whole trilogy of films. But either way, writing a script thinking that it's going to be a film trilogy is quite the gamble, because it's hard enough to sell just one script or even to get anyone to read it. So I think that covers the question. I have considered adapting some of my screenplays to novels, but usually it's gone the other way, and I think that's because the medium that I'm the most instinctively comfortable with, because I have done it since I could write, is prose. And that's kind of where my initial training was. That's something that I was able to do on my own from the start. With screenwriting, obviously, there are other considerations. How to maintain the formatting is a consideration, and the screenwriting software greatly helps in that. But when I first started, it was back in the day before we had that, and or before it was cheap or free, and you had to use your hand, your 4 fingers, and make sure the dialogue was 4 fingers from that side of the page and that side of the page, and so it took away a lot of the creativity because you're just trying to pay attention to standards. So for me, prose is usually my go-to, and I think that's why usually I start with a short story exploring an idea and then shift into a screenplay, or at least when I was first beginning. Now, like I said, it's a much quicker process for me. I'm trying to think of any of my recent screenplays and if I ever considered writing them as books first, and I don't think I did. And again, the other reason why I think it's important to not be so precious over your storytelling material in a screenplay is because of the fact that statistically it is likely never to see the light of day. It is likely to only exist as that screenplay. So I am all for people championing their work and fighting for their work and fighting to get it made. This is a world of independent artists for the large part now, and the internet's leveled the playing field in so many different ways. Technology has, and that's the future. And no one will ever fight for your stuff as hard as you will. So good on you if you're doing that. And I think pursue it. And I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't pursue making a film if you want to do that. But if you're like me and you're less into the filmmaking side and more into just the writing side, then that is a factor in the process. This is a story that I feel I have to write. So I'm going to write it. And I'm going to write it with the full understanding that I may be the only one who ever reads it. Because, like I said, it's a hugely collaborative process, and I don't know what the statistics are, but the vast majorities of screenplays that have ever been written have never been produced. And that's just how it is. So like I said, if it's a story that's incredibly dear to you and precious to you, and you feel like you just have to tell it and make sure that people hear it, then a book might be a better choice, because you do have the ability to self-publish. You do have the ability to guarantee that you can put it out in the world. I'm one of those people who the business side of things does not come naturally. It's a massive struggle for me. And I am one of those creatives who would be writing and telling these stories even if they never left my room. It is something that I don't feel I have a choice in, and maybe that's why I've written 10 plus screenplays that you can't read and that no one really has ever heard. It's just they were stories that I knew were fit for film that I had to tell, and then I told them, and they were out of me, and now it's there. And I guess if anyone ever says, wish I knew someone with a script about XYZ, I could be like, hey, I've got that. So I do have them in my library, so to speak, my KM Rice screenwriting library. But I'm perfectly okay with them being told without being heard or read, because I feel like I did the characters in the story the best I could by doing my part. And if the rest is going to ever fall into place, it will fall into place. If not, I don't think that it's a waste at all. I don't think that writing anything is ever a waste. And I'm okay with them there. There are some that I feel much more passionately about and that I want to exist in some form. And those ones I do more actively pursue. When people say, oh, you write screenplays, what do you have? I'll pitch certain ones far above others. But I do think it is important for a screenwriter to have a very large sample of genres and budget pieces, so that if you do get in a conversation with someone and they say, what do you have? You can be like, well, what are you looking for? And then say, hey, I've got this, and I could modify it to be like that. Or maybe you just want to take a look at this. Or, hey, I've written this type of thing before, you can have a look at it and I can write something similar for you. So, like I said, it's never wasted. It's always a benefit. And if nothing else, you're learning. And that's the most valuable thing you can get out of anything that you do in life, is to learn from it. And with books, I know I've mentioned before right now in this episode and other vlogs, the vast majority of the books I've written are not available to you yet. And that's because when I write series, I want to finish the series before I put it out. And I know you guys have been so patiently waiting for my Afterworld series. It is still up in the air on whether or not a certain publisher is going to be reviewing it, and that has been the delay. If I get a firm no, I'm going to go ahead and I've got a plan in place for how to launch that. So I apologize for that. I'm not intentionally writing all these books and then sitting on them to be like, read my book that's 3 years old by now. That's never been my intent. It's just sometimes it's hurry up and wait, and that's why I've written another book in the meantime, which is the companion novel to Darkling, and I'll probably write yet another book in the meantime at the rate things are going. So there you have it. And like I said, I wrote all these books that I'm sitting on, and it does feel weird to me to not have them out, because I do have that ability to put them out. I'm not dependent on an agent and a publisher to promote them for me and to publish them for me, so I do feel kind of like I'm cheating my readership a little bit, and I do have a sense of guilt over that. But at the same time, I also know that you guys want the best product possible and you deserve the best product possible, so that is why I am not rushing any of these things and am being forced to go at a slower pace than I would like. But So I'm telling you that because I said, oh, there's these screenplays and I don't care if they ever see the light of day, I still did my part in telling the story. Well, I did that with my books as well. My immediate family has read some of these books and really feels passionately about them. Some my friends have as well, and that's very satisfying to me. And I have to remind myself, though, that there's a bigger world out there other than my immediate circle, and that there are other people who will also enjoy these books and be touched by the content and maybe inspired by the content, and that is important to put that out there. It's also a very scary process because, like I said, when it is very precious to you, it's risky. So I feel weird because I can have that peace with my screenplays that they may never ever see the light of day, but with these books I've written that have still yet to see the light of day, I'm on the fence. I would prefer for them to be shared because they were meant to be shared. That was my goal in writing them. So I hope that answers your question. And you do have another K.M. Rice book to look forward to. If you haven't read Darkling, or it's been a while since you read Darkling, then pick up your copy and have a look through it again to refresh your memory so that you're ready for the Watcher. Or even better, get your own download of the audiobook, which should be out potentially in August, my voice artist is telling me. So that's coming right up, and it'll get you ready for the companion novel. So for me, and the final rose, for those of you who don't know, anyone who ordered a tangible, like a copy of my book or an art print through my crowdfund, was assigned a number, and the numbers were put into a random number generator online, and the numbers that came out got a rose in their shipment. These roses are symbolic of the character Victoria from Darkling, because she grew roses and did weird things with roses in the book. And she slipped these into a few packages. However, that doesn't mean you're marked for death or anything like that. It means you are entitled to a free digital download of Uriel's Midsummer Song. I forgot to mention that at the start of this. My crowdfund expanded to include the gorgeous Uriel, who is going to be composing, producing, and of course singing Midsummer Song from Darkling, and that will be for sale to the general public once the audiobook is out, but if you pre-ordered it through my crowdfund, you'll have access as soon as it's done, well before the public. And if you receive a rose, this is the final rose going out with the final shipment of rewards, then I know who you are, and you get a free download of the song. So from me, and one of Victoria's roses, I bid you all a fond farewell. Please keep the questions coming, and we are on the brink of, if not over, 1,000 subscribers now, which is very exciting, because I did not expect this many people to be finding this vlog that helpful, and I'm really grateful that I am able to share my knowledge with you and to help you along your journey as a writer, or even as a reader, or for whatever reason that you're here, because I get a lot by giving, and that's what I'm able to do through this vlog. So thank you guys so much for your support. I hope you're doing well.